Jason, it's just a little bit after and we'll go about an hour. It's hard to So, how we got here was, our last several months.
Sorry, I'm recording.
No
I am. Go ahead.
Okay. So, for the last several months, we've been talking about gathering information. We did some reconnaissance and scanning. In the scanning, we found host services, ports that were open on the network, did some different ways to figure out firewall rules through trace routing and escaping and some other tools. Then last month specifically, we did vulnerability scanning, a particular type of scanning, where we used Nessus and Expose to discover the vulnerabilities on the host that we found within that earlier. So to catch us back up, actually, we got a browser open already. So I've got Metasploit Community Edition open back up again. I have two hosts that we discovered. Then I ran the nmap with the XML, which we covered a few months back, and then ran Nessus and exported a .nessus file and ran Expose, which automatically integrates in with the Metasploit Community Edition. For the nmap and the Nessus scans, we use the import feature. Go to the workshop and then use the import button. We imported those in. And that catches us up to now where we have the Windows box and Metasploitable Linux with 71 and 283 vulnerabilities reported by a combination of all the tools together, respectively loaded into the system. And that's what we're going to pick up. So we basically know what's wrong with the box, and if we stopped at this point, this would essentially be a vulnerability assessment. If that's what we were doing for the customer, we're done. Where pen testing actually comes in is that we can verify or refute the findings of the vulnerability scanners. Sometimes they're right, and it's important to know when they are right. Sometimes they're wrong, and it's important to know when they're wrong so that you don't go trying to fix or patch things that aren't even actually broken wrong. Also, there is a credibility issue. If you have a big list of things that are wrong, and you turn those over to a customer, and then they end up finding out that for, say, 3 or 4 of the so-called criticals, there wasn't anything wrong, it attacks the credibility of the presenter, even though it was the vulnerability tool that had the false positives. But false positives are a part of life, so you have to verify the results. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. And today we're going to cover the loose roadmap real quick. By the way, if you missed any of the previous sessions where we did all the stuff leading up to this, Adrian had recorded it and put it on his website, irongeek.com. So all the videos are there, and you can catch up by going to his site.
Yeah, we're having a weird flashing issue here. Sometimes when you bring up Metasploit, I don't know why, just that screen starts flashing on and off.
Oh, okay.
I'll let you know next time it happens. We'll see if we can adjust anything. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So this is the rough, I guess, roadmap I thought we would follow that I kind of scribbled out. We're going to skip credential capture for now and come back to that later. That's going to be where we're going to do kind of like man in the middle or sniffing or listening on the network or getting between two computers. And we'll do some stuff with SSL, downgrade that, get in between encrypted transmissions and stuff like that. I think that'll dovetail a little bit better with some of the web exploitation. So I'm going to move that down here with the SQL injection and the command injection. And today we're going to basically fly through Metasploit framework. So it's kind of like saying we're going to cover internal combustion engine in the next hour. But we're just going to hit the highlights. I'm going to try to give you information strategically so that you can take it back and actually expand on it on your own time. So I'm trying to give you the sort of the overall picture of how it all Lego blocks together so that you can go home and dig a little deeper into each layer. Okay, so we have virtual machine environment running. We've got Windows XP SP2. We have Metasploitable 2, which is a free download from Rapid7. It's a vulnerable Linux. It's pretty well deliberately designed to work with Metasploit for testing and demonstration, so you should have no problem at all using that. And as our machine, from our point of view, we are Backtrack 5 R3. And this is us. Okay. So,
Jeremy, for
yes.
some reason when you switch to that window, it starts flashing. I have no idea why.
Huh. Not sure.
Is that showing out some kind of weird video, or can it... See, then it goes away. It stops flashing.
Oh, so it's just the browser? Or is it just all the...
When the
white
browser
background,
comes up,
or-
I don't know. Something causes it to freak out like that. I don't know why.
I can try to
It's not freaking out.
resize it. Is that better?
All right, we'll actually bring up the web browser again.
Oh.
It's not flashing right now. Well, yeah, it is.
Oh.
We may have to live with it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, that's a bummer. So imagine you're looking at Metasploit Community Edition. We're going to use Community Edition to keep track of everything, even when we're using the MSF console to do the actual work. And I'm going to try to run two parallel streams where we're using MSF console and the Community Edition to do the same thing, but I want to kind of show how the Community Edition works. Since it's more or less like a hacker in a box, it's real easy to get ahead and not really know what it's doing under the hood. Because literally all you have to do is click some buttons and it exploits a box.
Jeremy, just to hold you up for 5 seconds.
Sure.
This Metasploit Community Edition, is that in the backtrack 5?
I don't think so.
Okay,
So,
all right.
it's a good question. So if you, it's Metasploit 4.4 is the version I'm using.
Okay.
And the way I installed it was, if I back up a little bit here. If you go to opt Metasploit whatever,
Yep.
and there's an uninstall program. So if you get backtrack 5, I know this works. There's got to be a million other ways to do it. There always is, but I know this works. If you hit that uninstall program and uninstall it off of a stock backtrack 5R3, download whatever the latest version of Metasploit is off of Rapid7's site, and just run the installer again, it'll get everything set up for you.
Okay.
Nexpose is a separate program, it's a separate download, but it's the same concept. You go to the Rapid7 site, download it, and install it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So following those steps I got to this point, there's probably an easier way. There's a forum on Rapid7's community button. If you click that on their site, it'll take you to their forum, and you can post questions, and you might ask if there's an easier way to do it, or if it comes natively, and you can just upgrade it, other questions. Backtrack site, I think it's offensivesecurity.com, they have a forum as well. All right, so let's go look at some of the vulnerabilities, and then let's go ahead and get this one. We'll look at Metasploitable, and it's at IP address 102. It's going to be kind of important to just keep that in the back of your mind so we can keep straight what's what. If we click on vulnerabilities after scanning with Nexpose, importing Nessus, and importing Nmap, you'll see all of them are combined. Now, if you have version 4.3 and you click on vulnerabilities when there's hundreds of vulnerabilities, it may not work because it wasn't indexed as well as this new version 4.4. So I would definitely advise getting 4.4 if you're still on 4.3, because when you click the vulnerabilities tab, even with hundreds, it comes up in just seconds. So the vulnerabilities are listed more or less in order of best exploit to perhaps no exploit. So you'll see for these ones at the top, there's exploit for that problem, and an exploit for that problem, and an exploit for that problem. And this is one of the, I guess, hidden gems of Metasploit Community Edition that you really shouldn't take for granted. It maps the vulnerability, even when the vulnerability was found by another tool, to the exploit in Metasploit that goes with that vulnerability. That's not trivial. It's not easy to know that. I can remember a few years ago when I started using Metasploit more and more, that was one of the biggest things I struggled with, was matching up the vulnerabilities to the exploits at first. And after a while, you kind of get used to it. After you look it up online, 100 times or whatever.
I hate to interrupt you again, but isn't that also what Armitage does? What's the difference between this and the Armitage?
The Community Edition is a flavor of the commercial product, and I believe Armitage is, I'm not sure if it's open source, but it's community developed.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
With the same idea.
Same idea
Okay.
is you have this layer on top of the Metasploit database and framework that is tying things together, giving you a place to store everything in one spot, and makes it a little bit easier to manage everything. Metasploit Community Edition is the free edition of the commercial tool that they sell, Metasploit Pro and I think Metasploit Express. And I think Express is kind of, I don't know, I'll probably get this wrong, but I think it's more the standalone version. I think Pro is more like a team-based approach where you have like a central server and like all your teams logging into it. So you can all attack multiple hosts together. And, you know, if you get some loot, put it in the server and I can see it kind of approach. So, but yeah, Armitage is another good way to do it. So, you see there's a lot of vulnerabilities that exploitable, you might imagine by the name. So Metasploitable has DVWA and Matilda web applications, among others, already loaded and running in it. All you have to do is fire up the virtual machine, and they're there as well. All right, so nice big list of exploits. So I'm just going to start on page 1, and we're going to pick the, how about we pick the user map script this time, and then maybe we'll use a different one in a minute. Oops, I lost my spot, sorry. Okay, while that's doing, I'm going to go ahead and start Metasploit console. MSF console is the program. And then I'm also going to open up another terminal. Go over the structure real quick. Okay, so if we go into the MSF3 directory, there is a modules directory, among others. And inside of there is auxiliary, and exploits folder, and payloads folder, and a post folder. Those 4 in particular are good to know to start off with. So if we look inside of these, it's going to be modules as you might expect. If we go into, like, say, exploits, it's exploit modules. And they're organized more or less either by the operating system or the software type. Okay, so we have Windows and Unix and Solaris, which are self-explanatory. We have multi, which is multiple operating systems. And then you have some other categories. So if we go into Windows and poke around, we'll see that we'll have different either software systems inside of Windows or different services inside of Windows or add-ons to Windows. So there's MSSQL and Oracle and for databases, and there's email and HTTP and so on and so forth. So if we keep going, we'll pick the, let's see, is there Samba folder? Yeah, SMB, sorry. SMB folder. Okay, so if we actually go into the SMB folder, we can see that there's the actual modules, they're Ruby modules, RV. And for example, here is MS08067 Net API as an example. And then if you want to read them, all you have to do is open them up in an editor or whatever. You read the code and look at it, figure out how they work and all that kind of stuff. I have absolutely no idea how to write Ruby, but it's actually not bad at all to read. So. All right, so let me go back to here. One more. Okay, payloads. Has single stagers and stages. A single is where the communications and the actual exploit are just all in one program, one module, if you will. Okay. So exploit in the box just opens up the possibility of putting something useful on it, like some kind of software or command or script that'll do something for you. Open a shell or install interpreter or run interpreter in memory, whatever. A single just means that the channel, the communications channel, and the actual work payload, if you will, are all combined into one thing. They're inseparable. Stagers and stages work together. Stagers are loaders and communicators, if you will. They open up, they load the stage onto the target and get it set up and kick it running, and then they handle the communications back and forth. The stage is the program that you're sending over, the command that you're running, or the script. that you're executing on the target. So if you look in like stages, you may see one that you recognize. Look in Windows. And so see interpreter is one of the stages that you can send over, along with shell and DNC inject. Okay, so we got kind of an overview of how it works. The post folder contains the post exploit modules. We'll look at those when we get to the post exploitation phase. All right, console started up. Nice picture of a ninja. See, we said we were going to pick the user map script this go around, and we said the box was 102. So I think that one is Unix. Oh, no, sorry. Multi. Oh, that's wrong. Exploit, multi. Samba spelled out. User map script. Okay, so we're going to say we're going to use that. Well, how did I know this like folder structure here? If we go back over here and go to CD, let's see, we're going to go up a bunch of levels. So if we go into CD, modules, exploits, multi, Samba, there's user map script.rb. So you can see how the folder structure of MSF matches up to how you actually use the modules inside of the console. So we got the exploit loaded, and we've kind of dropped down into a subshell, if you will, where the command interpreter is sort of in that module, if you will. It's the best way to put it, I guess. So we can do show options, and that'll let us know how to set this exploit up. We can do show a lot of stuff. So if you do show and then double tab, you can see there's show all the exploits you can do, and the payloads, and the plugins, and the post, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Show options is probably the one we use the most today. All right, so the options are the host, the target, and then the port. And you see they're both required, however, the port's already set at 139. And assuming that we're happy with that, we can just leave it as is. We can certainly verify it by going back to the community edition. So if you click on services, and see the 139, it's probably pretty hard to see, but it's 139 TCP, Samba 302. So we're going to set the host, set our host, and you can do tab completion. (102). Show options. You can see everything is set. And if you're going to pick on this box all day long, you can do set G, I think it is, and then 192.168.56, 102. Yep, I'm wrong. Adrian, do you remember what that is?
It says
G. That's G.
Okay.
And you forgot to put our host as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're right. Thanks. Big hurry. Ah, there we go. Thank you very much. So I was wrong about being wrong. I was wrong about the wrong thing. Okay. So thanks for that. We got 102 set up. So that means that if we back out of this module and we go into another module, the set global set G will keep that R host static unless we set G something else. We can keep that setting all day long. All right, I think we're all set. That's the only thing we have to set. We can't pick the target. It's automatic. Type 0. We can set the payload. And so for the payloads, we have, if we double tab again, tab completion, it's going to go down to command Unix because those are the only payloads for this exploit. And if if we double tap again, it'll give us a list of all the different kinds. And there's basically you can do reverse or generic or whatever. And when you're ready, command is exploit. Sometimes you can use run. And wait, okay, that's actually pretty quick. So it says, it's kind of important right here, session 1 is opened. So it don't really get a command prompt or anything because this is a shell, it's not a terminal. So there's a bit of a difference. But if we execute a command like ls, it does work. So you can see that we're basically on the box. So we do like a who am I, try to get our bearings. Hostname is Metasploitable. So, and then we can print the working directory. Okay, so what authority do we have right now on the target? It's good for a card. For admin, basically. Can't do it. Alright, so at this point we can do whatever we need to do. So maybe we grab the passwords or whatever. Can't do tab completion. It's a bummer. That's why terminals are awesome. Tab completion. Okay, so there is that's the password. Alright, so we could copy that, save it, and then we could do that's a shadow. Can't help myself. I would tab complete if I could. Hate typing. So there's the shadow passwords. I've already saved those off just to save a little bit of time for us. So I grabbed password shadow earlier, and then we can use the unshadow command to smush them together. So that is that's passwords, John, unshadow, then you pass in like password, shadow, and then you redirect the output to say unshadowed or whatever. So we ran that command earlier, and we took the password file which doesn't have passwords. It has the usernames, and we took the shadow file, which does have the password hashes, and we smushed them into one file that John can work on. And so, let's see, now we can do.
Now, the unshadow, that's part of John?
Yes, it comes with John. So, if I go back into the John directory and just do a tab complete, here's the unshadowed program here, and then the John program is over. Okay, so this time I'm going to use the John program. And then we would pass it the unshadowed file, and then hit enter. And I'm going to go ahead and cancel it because I went ahead and did these earlier to save a little time. So I'm just going to do show. Okay, so there's MSF admin. And then we could SSH into the box, get a terminal, which would be a lot better access, obviously. Because we can tab complete. And then there's your username, and there's your password. And this account happens to be the admin account. Or, well, I shouldn't say admin. It happens to be an account that you can sudo with. So you can sudo admin. Right. These other ones are other accounts, sysadmin, so on and so forth. So we're going to cover post-exploitation in a different phase, so we're not going to go too deep into that today. But when we're done, we can kill the session. We can also have background sessions. You can save them for later and do some other work. Okay. All right, so we did that with the command line tool. Now if we go back over to vulnerabilities, and so we have Metasploit community. And we use the user map script. I think this time I'll just use this exploit here, it works too. So this is what I'm talking about is like hacking a box or clickable hacking. Is you click on that exploit from that screen that brings you over into the particular screen for that module. So where we're at right now is roughly equivalent to being right here on this command line inside of this module. And this is roughly equivalent to show options. And setting these is, set this, set that, here's set our host, and here's set target, and here's set payload, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of see how they line up together. And you can hit run module, and it'll go through the phases of staging the payload and then putting the stage up there. What's that?
Takes all the fun out of it.
Yeah.
Push button nuke, right?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on if this is like the millionth time you've used this, and your reports due at like 10:15 or whatever, right? And, so you're in a hurry. Save a lot of time. But yeah, I would caution on a serious note of using a tool like this, and you have no idea what it's doing at all, and you can't reproduce it. I guess you could carry my argument to an extreme and get to the point to where you could say, like, well, if you don't even know how it's defeating the canary on the stack, then you don't deserve to use the tool. You can always go to an extreme, but I think there is a healthy balance about, at least understanding what the tool's doing, even if you can't reproduce it bite by bite.
I was in a hurry for some reason.
If you're in a hurry, this would be a better option, I would say, for productivity purposes.
So next month you're going to tell us how it defeats the canary on the stack.
Not next month. I'll have to read up a little bit. We might do some of that if there's interest. We might do that. But if I do that 1 month and half the people don't come back, then it's your fault. Because that stuff is brutal. If you want to look into that, the book, I think the book's literally called "Hacking the Art of Exploitation" by John Erickson. Version 2 is out. It's the brown cover. It's extremely good at explaining the basics of how all that works. I don't know if it gets quite into like return-oriented programming, or I can't remember if it even covers canaries necessarily, but it definitely covers the basics really well. So, and you can understand it. It's readable. So,
What's his name?
John Erickson. I'm probably brutalizing his name, but I want to say it's like Erikson. And John might even be like J-O-N, I'm not sure. If you Google it though, it'll come up. It's been around for a while. So, thank you. Very popular book. We got a session, right? So, okay, click on sessions. Cool. And we have active sessions in session 2 on Metasploitable. We use this VS FTPD backdoor. If you don't know what that exploit's doing, it's actually kind of funny because it just sends a smiley face emoticon. And apparently this one particular version of this one particular FTP thing, if you send a smiley face into that exact version, it gave you, I want to say, root privileges on the box.
It makes you happy.
But to figure out what it was doing or whatever, just run TCP dump in the background and watch it go flying across the wire, and you'll see the little smiley face in there. I think my interpreter makes up some random garbage, some random like username like XYZ blah blah blah, and it was a smiley face. It's kind of neat. Okay, so how about? Well, let's map this back. So right now we've essentially typed in exploit hidden. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. We kind of got that shell, and so that's pretty much where we're at. Then now at this point we can run the post-exploitation modules. We kind of did a manual post-exploitation in our last demo, but it has the module names here, the operating system that it'll work on the left, and then what it does on the right. So if we say, I don't know, gather Linux gather dump password hashes, again, hacker in a box, click run module, you just wait, and then you go back over to the sessions, and we're in session 2. the data that you collect will be in here. So I guess it's in reverse chronological order. So here's the hashes we just collected just 1 second ago. And here's all the junk I was grabbing earlier. And then you can download them. Now, what's kind of interesting is I want to say it grabs everything and goes ahead and puts it all together. I think this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is the format that John wants. I believe they're already unshadowed. Somebody can double check me on that. But this is the shadow file, this is the password file, and then the Metasploit went ahead and just shoved them all together into the unshadowed. It's really cool. That does all that.
And I did have a question. When did they add the collect system data button?
Oh, I thought it had been there a while. I think it's a paid service though. So you click on that, yeah. So yeah, yeah, right. So that's basically making easy really easy. You click on that thing, and that's like the big giant red easy button. You just hit that, and boom, and it just goes nuts. So at that point, you pretty much click on that, and you go click on reports, and then you go launch. So you're done. I understand the next version is going to have even better reporting too. So I think the next version is going to come out 4 or 5 in maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Should be out pretty soon. At least that's the last information I have. So, okay, so we went through Linux, Windows. We can do the same thing. This time we use a different payload just to try to mix it up a little bit. So Windows, we click on that, we click on vulnerabilities, and there's basically no difference. You would click on your exploit. So remember earlier I said down in payloads there was the MS08 API. Well, here it is. Click on exploit. Do interpreter, right module. Set it all up for us. So it sends over the stager, that's already done. There's the stage going across. The stage is interpreter.rd that we looked at in the folder earlier. It's done. Go back to sessions. Session 3. And we have more choices here because, well, in a nutshell, there's basically a lot more host modules built for Windows. If you go look in the host folder, you kind of count them up. There's a whole bunch of Windows ones. And these buttons map to the host modules. So this is kind of like VNC injection. So we saw that VNC inject in the payload one earlier. There's file system. And then you can do, so you click on that, you get an automatic command shell. So let's see if you get PIR. Oh, sorry, our payload was interpreter, it wasn't shell. Okay, so we're in interpreter, right? Yes, we are in interpreter. Okay, so if we type in help, we get a list of the commands. And then if you want to further interpreter, if you want to get more information about what you can do, you can type in run space and then double tab. And then you can also, that might only work when you're actually in the not in this interactive web screen, but when you're in the actual MSF console. And then there's also, let's say it's use, and then you can load some additional modules, some additional post modules that'll help you out. So in this case, to do the equivalent of what we did on Linux, we can use hashdump. And there's the hashes. Then we just copy this as is. You do not need to, there's no equivalent of unshadow or anything. It's already in the correct format. So you simply copy this over into a file, run John, and crack the passwords that way. And that's just one possible post-exploitation module that just to have something to talk about today. Like I said, we'll go over post-exploitation later, and we'll look at a whole bunch of different things you can do, like get RDP into the box, and different kinds of shells, and all the different things,
to shut up. This is outside the scope of what you're trying to do here, but how do we know we're not setting off all kinds of alarm bells?
Well, you don't know based on what we did today. We haven't talked about any kind of evasion
Okay.
at all. So, and we're pretty well glossing over all the details because we only have an hour to talk about a really complicated tool.
Okay.
So we're basically just skipping everything. So
Just hacking the home user.
we're just covering enough to where if you went home, you could have a good chance of being able to recreate at least what we did, and then start to dig a little bit deeper into the other. Because there's 1,000 host exploitation modules we could have done. We just happened to grab some password hashes out of each system to try to keep it parallel, so we're doing the same thing in both boxes. There were lots and lots of different kinds of shells we could have used. We could have used Perturbator on Linux, and got a shell on Windows. We're just kind of trying to hit all the high points just to make it where you can go and recreate this.
Okay.
And if you have to, you can use the web interface if the console doesn't work out right away, and then use the information you learned from the web interface and parallel that back to the console so that you can figure out how to use the console. Usually I get a question about should I use the console, should I use the web interface? Well, the answer is basically yes. If you're doing this professionally, use whatever you got to do to get the job done so you can get on to the next job. Time is money, right? You only have so much time to work on the project. But even if you had, say, Metasploit Pro, the full-blown edition, the console still has a lot of nice uses. It's very lightweight. It runs quickly on just about anything. It's just a text-based.
Except the Raspberry Pi.
Except for the Raspberry Pi. Good luck getting Community Edition to run it all on that.
Yeah.
So I'd say still that would be an advantage. You've gotten it running on all kinds of phones. And
Yeah, well, I've got it running on
stuff,
a Raspberry
right?
Pi and some stuff, and I know other people got working on phones and so forth. It's a little slow on some of the.
iPad, right?
Yeah, I haven't tried it on iPad. I don't know. I'm sure you'd have to root it to do that, but.
Oh yeah. I get to root it to get your email. It's like it doesn't do all that. It's kind of just look at the web. Hey, there you go.
Portable TV.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can watch a lot of TV on it. But it's still web-based, right? So, okay, so the Windows, I guess let's do the Windows equivalent. Let's back out of this. So to back out is the word back. And that gets us back to the regular terminal. And then we'll do use. And I've already forgotten which one we used. But we don't have to use this one. Oh, that's right, we used NetAPI. Yeah. So back into the exploit folder, Windows. And it was SMB abbreviated. And it was MS08 underscore NAPI. Show options. Okay, now notice the R host is hard coded to 102 because we did the set G earlier. So we're going to say set R host 103, which was the Windows box. We already have port 445. We already have browser setup for the pipe. Some auto targeting. Okay. So payload works a little bit different. It doesn't exactly follow the folder structure. When we look at the actual folder structure, stage is Windows. Okay. So in exploits, the path was dead on exact to the path that we followed when we used the use command to choose the exploit in the first place. But in the payloads, you can kind of think of it as, I guess, starting maybe like right in there. It's kind of like it starts some directories down already. So Windows then interpreter. And then after we pick interpreter as our payload, then it's kind of like we pick the stager next. So this one's a little harder. It's not quite as intuitive as the exploit one because it just went down to a certain file and a certain file path. This one, it's more like you're going down in the stages, picking Windows interpreter, and then you're backing up into stagers, going down to the Windows directory again, and then picking like, bind TCP, for example. Okay, see how that all kind of ties back together. So, I do bind TCP. If anybody has any questions, just ask. I mean, I know we're just blazing through this. Okay, so automatically detecting target ties back to automatic targeting. Whoa, sorry, didn't work. Automatic targeting, exploit target 0. Session 2 is open, and it drops into the interpreter shell. So here is where you can type help. You can do tab completion, so you can type in get. You can see it's like get PID, get cribs, get system, get UID. Let's see who we are. We're already pretty good privileges. System. That works. The reason we're system is because of the exploit that we chose to use. That exploit exploited a process that already has system privileges, so we're the equivalent of the process that we latched onto. Interpreter is, I believe it's implemented as a DLL that gets injected into the process. So you have to be careful with that because, for example, if you do if you inject, say, interpreter and you do it via, I don't know, say reverse in TCP, and then you're in the, say, LSAS process, for example, a critical process, and reverse TCP, doesn't work. You pick up a port that's blocked or whatever to try to come back out on, and it crashes your DLL, you're going to take out that service. So you take out LSAS, well, Windows doesn't really run well without LSAS. It'll start a little counter and say, there's something really bad just happened, and in 60 seconds, I'm rebooting the box whether you like it or not, and then it reboots the box. And then you've lost your connection to the box. Or, yeah, I guess it just locks up. I guess the nicer version of Windows start counting down. So you have to kind of think through. I guess it goes back to your question, though, is this all seems magical, right? It's all just working. Well, it's because I tested everything out before I got here today. But you would have to kind of consider all these possibilities and maybe work on it in the lab. Especially if you had something like a firewall, you need to know what ports were open on in advance. So you'd have to do all that research that we did a couple weeks back where we kind of poked at it and figured out, like, okay, well, that firewall is open and this trace route will work. So if we take this route on this port using this protocol we got through, that's where we used the traceroute tool, and we said, okay, well, traceroute without CMP didn't do squat, and UDP's not working, but we went on TCP/80 and it worked fine. So we verified connectivity, and we could use that information now and come back in here and say, well, I want to do a reverse TCP on 80 because when we tested that in an earlier phase of our project, we noted that we got through that way when we did the traceroutes. That's an example. All right, well, we have an interpreter here. This is post-exploitation. So help gets you a bunch of commands. We already covered hashdown. If we didn't have system, we could type get system. And interpreter would try like crazy to get a system. And we could say, let's get UID. And then we could figure out if we were to elevator privileges or not. Hashdown, we already did that. Copy those over. Crackling John. And so run is one of the keywords. If you're taking notes, you want to write this one down. Make it run. If you double tab, then you can see all the different post-exploitation modules that you can run. And these are the ones some of which we'll go through when we get to post-exploitation later. And there's a whole bunch of them. Okay. If you want to add more functionality, you can do use, and then you can actually add in other modules that are not currently loaded to extend the functionality of Meterpreter. And I believe the way these work is, it's kind of like you have the Meterpreter DLL, and that DLL has this huge, vast array of stuff it can do that we just listed on the screen. But then we could say, like, use incognito. And so now I think the way it works is you send over another DLL that hooks in, and you've added on a whole nother big list of stuff we can do. And so now if we did like a run, whatever.
That allows you to impersonate someone else that's already logged into the box.
What's that?
Incognito.
Incognito comes with, yeah, I can't remember which ones it comes with now off the top of my head. I'm not sure if we can get help on that or not. Speaking about help. Yeah, I have to look it up. I can't think of how to get help on a command once you're actually already in there. Google, yeah, exactly. So, I'll find out before we do the post-exploitation, make sure I get all this stuff together first. So, okay, so I think we've paralleled everything. We've used Metasploit once we knew what the vulnerabilities were, and once Metasploit had mapped them, or Armitage mapped them, so that we knew which vulnerability matched up with which exploit, we were able to use the exploit to go into Linux using MSF console and Windows with MSF console, and then do the exact same thing with the web version of Metasploit Community Edition. And it would be interesting if someone wants to try to do all this exact same stuff, or as close as you can get it. You know, build a virtual network with Metasploit on it, with the kind of Windows you got on it, and then maybe walk us through the exact same thing with Armitage. That'd be nice to see all three interfaces compared side by side. Since I learned on the console, I'm kind of addicted to it. I pretty much tend to use that one because I just kind of know where everything is.
It's also the one most likely to always continue being supported.
Yeah, it works. I want to say that I've noticed that there's more exploits faster in it. Like if you do the MSF update and you compare the list of exploits and you compare that to the list of stuff that comes with the Community Edition, I want to say there's more exploits in the MSF console as well.
Yeah, Armitage definitely is the lags.
Does it? Okay.
Because I guess somebody has to then go in and do that business of, lining them up.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about.
Okay. So, if you have, say, you've hired a new crew or whatever, though, and you need something to give them a head start, I think that's another one of the nice features about like an Armitage or a Community Edition or a Pro or whatever it is you choose to use, is the learning curve is way smoother. If you're bringing, say, you hire a programmer in because you want somebody with a good background in programming, but they've never really done pen testing before, you need to bring them up to speed pretty quick. These tools can save a lot of money because you still got to pay them while they sit there and thump their head against the wall, right? So, so I think that's another good advantage of the web interface. But to each his own, right? If you like the command line stuff, it does run really well, and it's pretty easy to manage.
All the stages in Ruby and Perl, or whatever you decide to write in there.
Ruby.
Pretty much Ruby.
Yeah, as far as I know,
Is there a
because
reason for that, or is it just, because I assume they're all packaged up and running, you can drop it on any OS or run it on it.
yeah, the Metasploit framework is written in Ruby, and so that's why those.
This also references like Perl too up there.
Yeah, the Metasploit 2 was in Perl,
Okay.
so it wouldn't surprise me if there's some bleed over. So most of the experience I have is with Python, and which of course is neither. So as far as I know, if you have a Python exploit that you've gotten working, you can convert it to Ruby, but I don't think that you can just shove Python right in there.
Can package it up to a self. You know what I'm talking
I don't
about?
know how to do it.
Alright.
I'm not gonna say you can't.
There's a way of actually, well, sort of compiling a Python exe, my understanding. It's kind of like it combines the interpreter, or at least the parts it needs, with the script
Right, you
itself.
can
So it's
package
probably
the whole thing up so it'll run, so I don't have to have
Like
Python
itself.
installed on a Windows box. I can
Yeah.
just drop the whole Python, get on there.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Didn't know if there
Yeah.
was some interdependence between the framework and the box.
Yes, there is.
Okay,
Yes, there is. That's the whole point
so
of
that's why.
the stager and the stage.
Right,
Is that, remember when we were talking about the single, we didn't use any singles, but we talked about
Yeah,
it, and they're all
what got
bundled
me
up.
thinking about the.
The whole point of the stager and the stage is to, so that your stager, your communications channel, can be partnered with any of the stages. We just happen to use one particular stage.
Mix and match.
You're right. So we could take that bind TCP and combine that with any stage, and we don't rewrite any of the code at all.
Gotcha.
That's the problem with the singles is if you had a bind TCP interpreter and you wanted a bind TCP shell, you had to go write something else.
Yeah.
So they weren't Lego blocks; they were just intertwined. So yeah, if you had, I don't even know what to call that, a self-extracting Python or a self-running Python.
We call them frozen or something like that.
Yeah, whatever.
Rapid?
So another thing you could do that may even be a little simpler is you bring the interpreter back up. So a background of that session, so if we say sessions -L for list, we can see we have session 2. That's the equivalent of going over here and clicking the sessions tab. So see there's session. Well, that was a session 2 also, it's a coincidence. Because that session 2 belongs to Linux. And now it gets back. So we say session-I for interact 2. Whoop. Up the S off. And now we're back into the interpreter. And then to do what you're talking about, I think maybe upload would just be easier. That's one of the post-exploit modules. So you can say like upload whatever.
You just whatever
And
file
then
you
you
want.
upload it into the file system. You could also do shell from interpreter to jump over to the shell. So instead of like doing a bind TCP shell, you could do bind TCP interpreter going in and grab a shell if you actually want a shell in the box. So at this point, you're literally in Windows. And apparently it's System 32 because there's a lot of DLL in there. So, okay, so we do like CD. It's not LS. Okay, so there's a little more familiar Windows territory there. Now at this point, yeah, that box has to have Python, right? So I guess you're in business. You could also, I don't know if you really want to do this, but I mean, I suppose you could also, at this point, install like FTP or something. You have pretty much control of the box. That's probably not a good idea though. If you can just push a file up in memory. Now, interpreter is memory resident. So if we get out of here cleanly, there's not anything that's going to be written to the disk. No times are going to be changed or whatever. Exit the shell. But interpreter does come with some stuff to cover tracks that we'll talk about later. So there's ways to change the timestamps in the NTFS file system and things like that. All right. Boy, that was fast. So kind of roadmap again is we sort of did all this stuff today, more or less. And then next time we'll do more exploitation in November, because next month is the conference. So we'll do SQL injection and command injection. And with the command injection, we're going to use command injection to get telnet, to get SSH, to get RDP, so that we can open up the firewalls and turn on the services and everything. And we'll sort of we'll accomplish the same tasks that we did with Metasploit, but we'll do it using web exploitation instead of using exploits of vulnerable services. If that makes sense. And the end product will be the same. And then eventually we'll do exploitation where this will probably be in January because December we don't have a meeting. Where we're going to do man-in-the-middle stuff. Or maybe if we're lucky, Adrian will do that one. So,
Oh, I can do that.
yeah. So do like SSL strip and Entercap and Kane and all those fun tools where we actually just capture the passwords and the information flying across the wires. They would just log into the boxes at that point as legitimate users.
Yeah, I need to update some of my knowledge on that because I know there's some newer tools that come out that are supposed to make things a lot easier.
Have you played with Subterfuge yet?
No.
It got debuted at DEF CON this year, so it's fairly new to the scene. It's definitely something to check out.
Use a SSL strip at work. That's probably about the, I guess, I don't know, it's not new, but
It's effective.
it's effective. Yeah, it works really well. Especially if you do the, was it -L for lock or whatever, and this little lock symbol up in the browser. And we did that demo with a room full of developers and nobody noticed. Because in Firefox, it puts the lock icon on the tab that you're viewing, but it's just right above the URL bar. I mean, it's close enough to where if you're looking at the content on the web page, you know, not staring at the top left corner of the browser, the icon was close enough to where they didn't even realize it was above the URL bar and not in the URL bar. And these are web developers, so they tend to notice stuff like that on average. All right, so that's our roadmap. Next time is web exploits to get shells and remote Windows desktop, and Metasploit we use SSH. And we use a program called our desktop on Backtrack to get the remote desktop once we have to disable the firewall. We've got to enable services because the way I'm going to set it up on the Windows box and the Linux box, we're going to attack. I'm going to not only turn off the services, but I'm going to disable them so that we have to actually enable the service first and then turn the service on. And then once it gets running, we need to put a user account on, get a password. Then we got to defeat the firewall, and then we can actually get in and be a little bit more realistic. All right, it's 2 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and take some questions.
So what are you actually using this for, Jeremy? Are you like attacking Russian card forums? Or aren't you worried about coming after you or anything?
No, we use it to, we use it in test, typically, so test environment. Or we'll set up a box to test a vendor's product. You know, so we'll deliberately build a virtual machine, install the product on there correctly and all that. And, you know, this is just one of 100 different tests you could do. You may or may not necessarily find a vulnerability that's exploitable. You may or may not necessarily use Metasploit. But if you get into that circumstance where you have found a vulnerability using SS or an expose or your favorite tool, then Metasploit is one of the best tools available to be able to take advantage of that and get onto the box. And then once you're on the box, that's where you're going to go grab, you know, the hashes and all that stuff to prove the kind of damage. I mean, you want to be careful not to hurt the box, but you also want to prove that this is serious. So you want to do something like, you know, grab hashes, crack passwords, things like that. And then in your report, you can show management that there's an actionable threat, a real risk. You can also, I guess, confirm the findings. So you basically said, say, Nextpost said there was a smiley face backdoor on this box. Doesn't mean it's true. That's just what the tool reported. Then we go into the box using the smiley face backdoor. We grab the password hashes, and which are supposed to be protected because they're supposed to be only accessible by root. Crack them, and then we say, well, now we could add ourselves, you know, as a user to the box, or we could take all the data off the database, or we could change the web logs and var www, or change the web pages, I should say, to So that's what you would use this tool for. It's another tool in the toolbox in that circumstance where there's a vulnerability that can be exploited on the box. Or potentially, if you can write a vulnerability and you can add it to the framework, and then you can use your own exploit to get into the box as well. You would have to write it in root as far as I understand. Or port it. Alright, so we got some good questions. Contender?
Well, I got lots of ideas.
Yeah, let's get it. Alright.
Save that for somebody
Can't
else.
get away from it. Any other questions?
Are you gonna cover migrating processes and such?
Yes, that'd be post-exploitation. So, yeah, we'll probably try to either migrate into Explorer in some cases so that we can do things like take screenshots, for example. We may migrate into processes that have higher privileges so that we can do something that we can't do in a lower privilege process. We may migrate out of Explorer and into something else, but we'll cover migration. Yeah, the process that your interpreter is hooked into, remember you're running with the authority and the ability of that process, so you may want to jump around from process to process to getting otherwise that migration. LSAS is not necessarily a bad process to be hooked into because it doesn't require that anyone be logged in. So you might jump back to LSAS to get persistence so you can jump to, something else. Any other questions? Well, I know we covered it pretty quick, but that'll get you started, and then we'll look at some of the web stuff, which is, again, it will result in the exact same conclusion, but it's going to be done through a website, and those are, it sometimes can be pretty hard to convince people to fix web vulnerabilities. Developers know the code better than anyone else. Even if you're the one doing the exploit, chances are they know the code a lot better than you do. And sometimes it's really hard for them when they're thinking, I know this code better than anyone else. I can't exploit this site, which is probably true. They tend to think about getting things done, not about breaking things. And therefore, the site must be safe. I mean, if the person that knows the most about it can't do anything with it, surely no one on, some random person on the internet that can't see the code is not going to know anything with it. And it turns out that's not really true, of course. So people that break into things are really good at breaking into things. People that develop things can be really good at developing, and they may not have each other's skill sets. So it can be important to get loot on web engagements because sometimes you will have trouble talking them into fixing it.
Maybe pass along the exploit itself to them. Say, hey, did this, use that, this is how. It's pretty obvious at that point, isn't it?
I get faster results if I just take a screenshot and jam it in a report.
Good.
Yeah. If I have to wait for the developer to find time to go do it, and if they don't do it right because they don't know how to do it, it just chews up days that you don't really have. Usually, you're not giving a report to the developer either; you're giving it to the manager. So you're making your case when you give the report of you should fix this, and if your case isn't already solid, they're going to tear it down. So. Remember, the developer gets to sit in a meeting and talk about it, and you may not even ever meet the manager. You might just be saying it to your manager, saying it to their manager, saying it to that manager.
Right. Your whole.
Right. They may be in another country, who knows. I find it's just a lot better to go in and just take a screenshot. It's like Vegas. If you don't have a screenshot, it didn't happen. Right? That's no testing. So, is there another question? You asked second most questions. Continue.
I got one.
All right, cool.
Thanks.
All right, I got one more. If anybody would like the Contenta card, take that to the conference, and it'll get you a kit in the room without having to bring your own can.
Do you know what the actual contest is going to be? Is it just going to be who can get the most?
The Contenta contest?
Yeah.
I think it's, I want to say it's signal strength.
Right.
What he's going to do is signal strength. One of the things I was going to do was and I talked to him about this, but I've got some test equipment. We can do some things. We can actually tell what frequency band and how well the antenna's tuned for that for the 2.4 band.
Like throwing a collar and wrapping it in tin foil.
And honestly, the thing is he's got different types of hands and stuff, and it's the physical dimensions on there that depend on what frequencies it's tuned for. But I'm going to talk to him about that because
You're not allowed to compete in this.
no. I'm going to be helping out with it. So
Just ups the challenge.
I'm going to be helping out with it. But I think he was looking at
Sets
it
the bar pretty
initially
high.
from purely like what signal strength can you pick up this.
Never say never.
Right.
But I think one of the things I will do is demonstrate, like, what frequency and how well is it tuned for the 2.4 does it work? And we can tell by the different can types, different designs. It's like a Pringles can, you can get that out.
Thanks, Jeremy.
All right.